Two top 25 matchups in a big week on the bubble. The push for seeding and making the tournament is in full swing. Texas A&M faces Mississippi State, and Alabama plays Missouri in top 25 battles. Meanwhile, Vanderbilt, Oklahoma, and Arkansas have uphill challenges, but big opportunities against Kentucky, Florida, and Auburn.
Plus, the NCAA Tournament Committee previewed the top 16 seeds currently in this year's tournament, and the in-state rivalries this weekend did not disappoint. We're recapping the action between Vanderbilt and Tennessee, Ole Miss and Mississippi State, and of course, the Iron Bowl of basketball with Auburn and Alabama.
That's today and more on the Hoops Southbound Show. Substance-wise, this is probably going to be the biggest show we've done this week. We're still going to try to keep it in that hour time frame that we normally do the show in here today, but there is a lot to talk about. Not only did we have an awesome weekend of basketball, this is also like our first episode where we're going to really hone in on our March Madness stuff because there was a big announcement that took place we're going to get to. And then we got all the games here in the midweek as well. It is a jam-packed episode for you guys today. So Maddie, other than us having, fun little crosstalk, let's just go ahead and let's get started on what happened this weekend in the rebound. The game that was on everyone's mind and they were excited for, the showdown, round one of the Iron Bowl of basketball, goes to Auburn 94-85. Maddie, honestly, this game for most of it really felt like Auburn was on cruise control about until there were 7 minutes left to play in it. And then Alabama goes on this 20-6 run that started around the 13-minute mark all the way to the 7:49 mark. And suddenly we have a basketball game on our hands. Jedi Broom gets hurt around the same time frame, and Alabama also just starts hitting threes. Where they started out this game just ice cold from deep, well behind their season averages and three-pointers made per game, and that had caused a huge gap in this offensively for Alabama. Broom goes and sits on the bench. Auburn comes out of the timeout immediately at the media timeout, and they go back up 7. And then the next big moment is that Dylan Cardwell fouls out of this game with just under 5 minutes left to play. Janai Broom, who had taken his shoe off and was in a certain amount of pain there on the bench, puts that shoe back on, checks back into the game. Gutsy performance from him. This is a 6-point game at the under 4, and this one battle back and forth. You got 2 minutes and 22 seconds left in this one. Then we have this crazy foul sequence. Chris Youngblood pushes CMB into the goalpost. CMB takes a swipe at Chris Youngblood on the way out. And then you have Denver Jones, at least I think it was Denver Jones, if I remember correctly, clotheslines Jared Stevenson as Alabama is moving the ball down the court. And we go to replay because, of course, we're going to check out some flagrants here. What else do you expect in a rivalry game but some just complete physical nonsense? In my opinion, there should have been 3 flagrants called in this whole sequence here, but CMB gets called for the flagrant. It's a crazy sequence. It's nuts, but Youngblood goes 1 for 2 at the free throw line, and then Alabama still gets the ball, but they come up with nothing. All ball blocked there by Janai Broom on that possession, and that's really the story of how this game closes out as Auburn closes this thing out with a ton of rim protection to get the win, 94-85. Maddie, it's round 1. We knew this was the big game, the first one of what's going to decide the SEC regular season championship this year. 1 versus 2, huge March implications for both teams in some capacity. But what were your takeaways from this basketball game?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing to take away from this game for me is you look at Auburn, one of the big things we talked about is, does their offense travel? We know it's going to be a rivalry game. Auburn was getting every single shot that they wanted. And, we talked about Alabama having a little bit of rougher defense, but if they were able to shoot, then they'd be fine. Unfortunately, Auburn was the one getting the shooters last night. And, I mean, this is going to be incredibly difficult for Alabama now to try and make this series 1-1, to go to Auburn's house and be able to take that one, because this is the one that you needed to win if you're Nate Oates. And unfortunately, just with their shooting performance at the beginning of this game, they couldn't dig themselves out of that hole.
Yeah, that is a huge portion here. Auburn's defense is very good. We knew it was a good defense, but to hold Alabama to what they did, like Alabama shot 5 for 26 in this game behind the arc for three. That's alarming if you're Alabama because you're talking about a team that normally gets around 28 to 29 threes off in a game. You come up four short behind your average there, and then you come up four made threes in this game behind your average also. They shot 19.2% from three in this game. This is not last year's Alabama team. The crazy thing is they have the players who can shoot those at much higher numbers, but they're simply not. And the three-point shooting has just not been there at times. Armour did a really good job of chasing them off the line, making them uncomfortable, and Alabama chose to drive a lot instead of working for those threes and slowing their own pace down and just kept trying to go get those twos. Unfortunately, we're met with a lot of collision and a lot of physicality under the basket and in the paint. It was not a game where Auburn could get or where Alabama could get a lot even going from an area that they've been exceptional and elite at in 2-point shooting this season. Overall, majority of the points still come from the backcourt for Alabama in this one. Mark Sears, 18 points. LeBaron Filan, 10 points. Out of the front court, Grant Nelson's probably your best, who has 12 points and 12 rebounds in this game, but a collected minus 20 in this basketball game for Grant Nelson overall. Only goes 5-11 from the field, hits no threes in this one. While meanwhile, Auburn's getting much more out of their front court. Janai Broome, 19 points, 14 rebounds. Then you had Chaney Johnson, who had 14 points, 5 rebounds. Dylan Cardwell goes plus 11 in this game. Not a lot of offense. It's not expected for him to just be a huge offensive contributor. But going plus 11 is exactly what you're looking for out of him, and especially some really good defense. So front court, massive performance for them. Shuts down Alabama, really causes them a lot of headaches overall in this game. Alabama just flat out struggled. Did not have the game that they needed to have. Out of the 70 shots they took, only made 27. This is not what you want to see if you're Nate Oates offensively.
Yeah, especially on your home court. It just was kind of the fall apart game, in my opinion, for Alabama. You know, the thing that they rely so heavily on just wasn't there. So they've got to, cross some T's, dot some I's before we get to tournament time if they want to continue on this road, because you can't have an off night in the NCAA tournament.
Yeah, and again, it's because they aren't as efficient. They are still hitting threes. They are wanting to shoot threes. They've been very good at two, but you're talking about a team that knows the analytic importance of an efficient 3-point shot, and if they can get that, and 19% ain't gonna cut it at all. It's something to really talk about and some things to work on going into that next matchup toward the end of the season, that may ultimately decide the regular season champion. But obviously, if you're Auburn, you're feeling really good about your chances of getting a regular season title now, getting a road win against the team who's the closest competition to you at this point. There's definitely the betting odds are definitely on Auburn's favor right now, coming after that, and what was a going in tied matchup for the stand. Let's go to the next game. We had a couple of huge rivalry games this weekend.
Yeah, let's talk about another in-state rivalry game. The Bulldogs got out the brooms because they got the sweep over Ole Miss. Absolutely not what I was expecting in this game, but everything we talked about last week and what needed to happen, what needed to go right for Mississippi State went their way. Let's talk about the front court. RJ Melendez went absolutely off in this game. 17 points as the team leader here, taking the sweep. I mean, the Bulldogs had an excellent game from Josh Hubbard, Riley Kugel, and Keyshawn Murphy as well. But RJ Melendez just stepped up, had a big man game for sure. And then, on Mississippi State's or Ole Miss side, you got Jalen Murray and Sean Padula combining together for 27 points, but it just wasn't enough. Mississippi State's defense held this team very, very well, much lower than their regular season average. So kudos to that Mississippi State defense, because they did what I didn't think was possible for them at this point in the season. Are they starting to climb back up, David?
I think it's a possibility if they play like that, but you're right. They got off this just kind of rocking game or this rocking situation that they were in. They lost 3 of their last 4. Granted, against good competition, but like this road win is huge for them this season. It definitely puts them where they look like they're going to finish somewhere like 9-9, maybe even 10-8 in the SEC, depending on how a couple of these games shake out. They've got a real chance, to end up in the top, the top half of the conference this season. You're right. This is a game where they did some things definitely better than their last game, against Ole Miss, which they won that last game against Ole Miss, but they kind of took this game over in the second half. You had two really big runs here from State going from, starts of the first half and ends at the beginning of the second. It was a 19-6 run by Mississippi State. And then they had a 17-4 run with about 15-12 to 8:55 in the second half. Second half was State's ball game all day long. And then you're right, they took advantage of those areas that we said they have to be better in this category, or they need to make sure they win this category again. They shot 10% better from the free throw line in this game versus last game with Ole Miss. They win the glass by plus 12. They doubled up Ole Miss on the offensive glass, took advantage there. Both teams, it was an even game on the turnover battle, but State got Ole Miss to turn over the basketball, double digits, which is not a common occurrence for Ole Miss, who's out there averaging this season when it comes to turnovers. They're the number one turnover percentage team in the country. Like very good at not turning the basketball. They turned it over just as much as State. State takes advantage of some of that in transition, gets a couple of situations they want, and then State had really good rim protection. They won in the area they had to win in. The front court is better. That is the area that I think State is the better basketball team in, and they did a really good job there. Took a bunch of crazy shots in this one, but most of those came in the first half, and they cleaned up a lot of it in the second half, finding normally where you want to be, that high elbow around the 3-point line and in the paint. And that's where you want to find it. And they cleaned up a lot of their shot selection that second half. Um, Ole Miss tried to stay in it, but again, great performance. Great performance from State defensively, great performance on the glass, everything that you want to see, and taking advantage of those areas that needed improvement that allowed Ole Miss to get into the game last time. This is an impressive one. Definitely one of them, importance to your fan base, but more than anything else, it's another quad one win.
Yeah, let's talk about another quad one opportunity that we had on another in-state rival. David,
Yeah,
we were a
it
little afraid of what was about to happen in this Vanderbilt Tennessee game.
Yeah, we were hanging out watching this one for a little bit. In the first half, it looked like Vanderbilt was going to sweep Tennessee on the year, but sure enough, Tennessee puts together an excellent second half for the most part and really took this game over late, is what they needed to do. Vandy led this 44-31 at the half. Tennessee goes up and puts up 50 in the second half. Much better half of basketball for the Volunteers,
I
and
mean,
they definitely
you
took
have
advantage.
sorry. You've got Zakai Ziegler going out in the second half. Nothing. Goose egg in the first. 22 points, all in the second half.
Yeah.
I mean, he, just to touch on that leadership there, absolutely phenomenal for Zakai Ziegler getting out there and getting his team in the position they definitely needed to be in.
You want to talk about, like we've talked about, the efficiency of scoring and the importance of it. You're right. Zakai Ziegler had no points, and then shoots 63.6% for the rest of the game. Much better on a grand total of 11 field goals. And then Chaz Lanier goes 56.3% from the field on 16 field goals, hitting 2 threes. Ziegler hit 3 threes. That was better. And then Jordan Gainey got out there. Didn't hit a three in this one, hit around 37%. You like to see a little bit better, but he goes +3 in this game overall. Meshack, I would say that this is probably one of his best offensive games. 9.6 rebounds, goes +7 in this game. Overall, good performance from them. The second half is what made a difference. It was a little bit of a tussle there at the end where it was like, oh, Vandy's hanging on by a thread. Vandy's hanging on by a thread. And just Tennessee ends up getting the job done. The second half, I feel like, is what Tennessee wants to look like, and that's what they want to be. It's a matter of bringing that each and every game is where they want to be in this situation. But this was a good win. This was a good quad two win for the Volunteers. For Vanderbilt, this would have put them assuredly in the NCAA tournament. But for Tennessee, this was a decent win quality that you needed, and you also just needed a bounce back game quite a bit after the game there with Kentucky not going getting Kentucky sweeping you on the season. So Overall, what you want to see if you're a Tennessee fan.
And I mean, Vanderbilt got those predictive metrics up a little bit.
They did.
So, that's always a plus to look at on that side because they weren't supposed to win this game anyway. Would have
Yeah,
been
and
phenomenal, but
Vanderbilt's in a spot where they're essentially in right now. They're not one of the last teams in. I think they're in the last bye category right now. So they can afford to lose this one a little bit more than even some of their SEC peers who are on the bubble. That being said, for Vanderbilt, and we'll talk about this a little bit more, the road is not easy at the end of the season. They got another game with Kentucky, which we're going to talk about this week, Ole Miss, Texas A&M, Missouri, and then they got to face the two other bubble teams that are in the chase with them right now, Arkansas and Georgia, at the end of the year once March gets here. So it's a pretty hard road. It's a pretty hard road for both teams at the end of the season, or for Vanderbilt at the end of the season. But that's the case with all these SEC bubble teams. Who's going to pull out and who's going to get those wins there at the end? It's going to be crucial for Vanderbilt to pull off at least trying to pull off a win against their bubble team peers just a little bit to help them out. But they're really close. They're very close to being that NCAA tournament. They had a little bit more cushion than everyone else. We'll see what happens in Rupp this week, but that's certainly what needed to go down. Speaking of Maddie, we of the NCAA tournament. It was a big week in the NCAA tournament, and this is what we're talking about. Let's go ahead and let's start talking about Destination San Antonio here in March.
definitely. So the top 16 as of right now has been released. And unless you haven't been keeping up with basketball, it shouldn't shock you that there are several SEC programs sitting at the top of the field. I mean, we've got three alone in the no and as a number one seed, two at number two, and then you keep diving down the list, and they just keep adding up.
Yeah, there it was a deep reveal here. If you were definitely one of the people who were big on the SEC breaking the record, immediately seeing five teams in the top eight, and then seeing on an additional team, six of the SEC teams in the top 16. That is quite over 25% of the top 16 seeds belonging currently to an SEC team. Then this shouldn't have been a surprise to you. And I think it speaks to the strength of the conference and how the committee views the SEC this year, is that they are definitely vibing with the top tier, historically great conference idea right now. I think that is encouraging when we get to bubble talk here in a little bit, but what these teams have been able to accomplish is great. I do want to throw out another note here, and this is important. This will not be the 16 more than likely on Selection Sunday. This will change. There will be teams who made this group who will not be in there. They will drop a seed line or two. There may be some of these threes that become twos, twos that become one, et cetera, and vice versa. Every which way that you look. So it's possible a lot of these teams move. Like, for instance, Missouri is a lock right now, according to several bracketologists. They may move in if they win out or something like that into the top 16 category. That's definitely a possibility. But I would say that this is the strongest indication here is that there are several SEC teams that, with the number of SEC teams, I think it speaks to the amount of SEC teams that they're going to get in, because you look at that top 16, imagine the teams who have beat them. Those are quad 1A opponents now to those teams on their resume. So this should echo very strongly to everyone about where the SEC is going to be at this season. This is going to be a record-breaking year in all actuality for the conference. I want to put together here. I went ahead and put the big board numbers together because, like, out of this 16, normally your national champion is going to come somewhere out of this group. So I went ahead and looked into the past trends and everything else, and I applied our big board score to them. Right now, though, and the Auburn fans gonna love this episode because they beat Alabama this week, and right now they are the only team in this current top 16 with a perfect score of 5.0 coming out of this top 16 group, out of our national champions trend group. If you want to know how that works, go back to prior episodes. But no team currently is even with them. They're a 5.0 perfect fit. Last year we had three teams who fit this trend. Auburn alone is the only one who fits the national champion trend over the last 20 years. So that's a bit surprising. The lowest score right now is Wisconsin at 2.0, and they're tied with St. John's. The lowest SEC team is Texas A&M at a 2 seed at 2.25 out of this group. So we'll see how it shakes out on how the field's gonna go. But right now, I saw that money line bet they had on college game day, and they're like, yeah, Auburn's moved behind Duke and the chances to win a national champion. Boy, put some money on Auburn. Like that's all I've got to say. If you're getting better odds on Auburn, this feels like a year for them because, like I said, it would be a trend-breaking year for Duke to win the national championship this year. They do not fit the mold of a category of a past national champion right now in the last 20 years of college basketball, unless it would be something like a John Calipari Kentucky team. That's what it would look like. Is that 2012 John Calipari team where they've got freshmen leading the way? That's what's holding Duke back. Is that most national champions are led by upperclassmen. Auburn's loaded with them. That's one of the reasons that they have a perfect score. Almost every team but Duke, though, has some other quality about them. Like some teams like Alabama, it's the fact they're not shooting the normal 30-point percentage that so many champions have. Some don't have the defense like Purdue. Others are well outside the BPI. And then there's other teams out there with a combination. But Auburn right now looks like a national champion, and they look like the front runner in this pack of 16, based on our spreadsheet right now of what national champions look like. So a lot of praise there, Maddie. What did you think of the top 16?
It was almost to be expected for me. Well, at least for the first eight. I figured they put Duke in there. We've talked about how we feel like they're a little bit overhyped, but everybody else seems to love them. Thought Purdue might be just a little bit lower just based off of metrics. I like Houston in there as
I like
well.
Houston. I surprisingly like Houston. Normally, I don't like Houston because their offense isn't good enough. It's decent enough this year. Like I could see Houston being a Final Four team. Like I think they're pretty darn good.
And then I was a little bit shocked about Arizona. I thought they'd be a little bit further down the list, but sitting at a number 3 seed, it's one of the I think they're going to be one of those teams that might possibly move down.
You had Arizona. I was a bit not shocked, not shocked. I want to be clear here. I thought Kentucky would be on the 4 line, not the 3 line, and having them as the second number 3 was a bit surprising to me. I thought they would either be the last number 3 or the first number 4 or something like that. I mean, I know that's hammering the details there, and the way that the committee's thinking right now and what they're kind of valuing. To me, it sounds like they're putting wins well higher than losses. It's my biggest take, but that's just my guess. I would say that Kentucky certainly got the wins this year. They had some funky losses. Let's see what happens now. Like now that they've had that loss to Texas on the road, which is a quad one game. I don't think that's going to penalize them much, but I wonder if it does drop them down to where I originally expected them to be at, there as the last number 3 or the first number 4, where I was kind of originally anticipating them being at. But there were some other teams who took some bumps. Arizona lost to Houston this week. I believe there was a couple of others that got a little crazy with, I know Michigan got the win against Ohio State. St. John's, I believe, took a loss this week. Like there's some up and downness to this as well. Not everybody who's here, even on Saturday, may not even be there on Monday. We're not going to get an update from the committee on this. Like I said, this keep in mind, this will not be your 16 on Selection Sunday, but we have a glimpse now of the picture of the way the committee is thinking about things. So should definitely help paint the picture a little bit in everyone's mind on this, especially for those teams who are sitting at, are we going to make the tournament or not? So let's go ahead and get to the bubble watch here. Crazy, crazy day on the bubble. I texted you last night and I was like, if you want to watch some great basketball outside the SEC, just to keep an eye on things, you need to watch basketball from 5 to 9 Central Time. That's our time, folks. I was like, you need to watch from 5 to 9 all the games that are going to get started at that point because you're going to have bubble game after bubble game after bubble game of significant importance. There was a lot to it. Now, first off, let's go ahead and let's jump to the bubble page here because, let's start with the last 4 buys. This is still based on Joe Lenardi's last last 16 teams here, this group that we've been talking about. He's pretty much on it this season. I know I have some down opinions about Joe Lenardi, but like overall, like this is pretty consistent. So everyone's familiar with Lenardi, so I'm just going to use his for now. There's probably a couple of extra teams to keep an eye out on. There's definitely going to be different opinions. Now, first off, Nebraska's playing a game today against Northwestern at Northwestern. We'll see how that game goes. By the time we get done editing the show, I'll have the graphic updated and that we should have a final score in that Northwestern game. The big game in the last four buys, and this is one we need to touch on, is that Oklahoma lost to LSU on Saturday. That's big. Right now, when you look at the field, LSU, I should note, is the worst loss, I believe, in the SEC right now. If you play them on the road, they're in a crazy spot. So that ended up being a quad three loss at home for Oklahoma. That's the second worst loss in the SEC this season. You cannot lose to you cannot lose to LSU and South Carolina on the road. South Carolina's in that group too. I thought they would be higher, but just double checking the net right now. So if you lose to those teams at home, it becomes a quad three game. It is a problem when that happens. So that may be enough to drop Oklahoma significantly down the list, especially when you look at the teams who are immediately under them with Vanderbilt, who, yes, lost to Tennessee on Saturday, but has no bad losses and played pretty well on the road. Oklahoma probably falls behind them. Texas gets the win over Kentucky 82-78. Oklahoma certainly falls behind Texas at this point. BYU beats Kansas State 80-65. I would imagine, given BYU's record right now, you're in a situation where you probably are falling behind BYU at this point. BYU is a team that has also taken no bad losses and is just one quad one win short of what Oklahoma is, or I believe two quad one wins short. Then San Diego State is probably might be where you're lined up with right now. Depending on what San Diego State is able to do from here on out and how the rest of the committee looks at it, I would imagine that Oklahoma is sitting in that last four in line right now in desperate, desperate need of finding a win. Now, for the other ones, we talked about San Diego State, Arkansas losing to Texas A&M. This is probably the most controversial one out of everybody. Is Arkansas in or not right now? I'll tell you, it doesn't really matter. The biggest issue with Arkansas is these next two games, which is part of this three-game stretch that Arkansas is on. They are projected to lose all three of them. If they win one of them, that's what you're looking for. If Arkansas can beat Auburn or they can beat Missouri, which I know the beat Auburn thing is a really big ask. You don't have to poke at it, but I'm saying for, logistical purposes, if they beat Auburn or they beat Missouri when they get back to Bud Walton Arena, that puts them on a path to a lock at that point, and setting up that 8-10 season in the SEC, which would be about the lock line right now for teams in the SEC. It's got nothing to do actually with conference standing. It's got more to do with the quality of wins, but the amount of quality of wins, if you have 8 quality wins coming out of conference play, plus your Michigan game that you had, you're in good spot. You're in a good spot. And who knows, if Lipscomb keeps playing well, that might even bump up to a quad 2 to help Arkansas out just a little bit. They would need Lipscomb to raise 7 spots in the net to help them out on that quad 2 line, which is really the big thing that's hurting Arkansas is their quad 2 line more than anything else. They have no bad losses. Therefore, it's hard for Arkansas to drop, but they need wins if other teams around them are also winning. Speaking of teams around them, Georgia on Saturday, a lot of bracketologists would say they would drop Georgia out of the last 4 if they lost. They did end up losing to Missouri 87-74. That's going to have some consequences. Now, they are also a team that does not have bad losses, so they're not going to fall hard. They're just going to more than likely fall just out of the field into that first 4 line. So who's going to replace them? And will 2 teams jump in over Arkansas and Georgia at this point? So the teams that you were looking for, we had a practically an elimination game between SMU and Wake Forest. In this one, Wake Forest gets the win. It's a quad one win, which really kind of helps erase that quad three loss they took to Florida State. We'll get into a little bit more of that here in a second. But yeah, SMU still without a quad one win so far this season, losing to that Wake Forest game. VCU had the weekend off. They'll play UMass next. And then Indiana takes the loss to UCLA on Friday night. That's not going to hurt them significantly, but it's not the result that they're looking for. Kansas State takes the loss to BYU, ending their hot streak. North Carolina beats Syracuse. It's not a huge needle mover, but it might bump the Tar Heels back into the first four out conversation. Xavier beats DePaul. That is certainly not a needle mover. Xavier's beating it seems to be beating the bad teams right now in the Big East. And so not a big help. And then we already talked about San Diego State beating Boise State at this point. That's Maddie's middle age or spotlight. Your team needs some help if they're going to make the tournament this year. They're going to need some help, Maddie. But that's where they're sitting at right now. Rough game last night on the late circuit overall. So that next level of conversation, we're talking about bubble watch here. And if you can figure the answer out to this, you can do bracketology and college basketball. This is the bubble watch situation if it were to happen tomorrow. Like, let's say today was Selection Sunday. Who do you put in? This is the line. Arkansas is 3-8 in quad one, 1-2 in quad two games, 4-0 in quad three, and 7-0 in quad four. So no bad losses. Those Q3s and Q4s, if you're new to looking at resumes, if you have a loss in either of the Q3 or Q4 categories, those are your bad losses. Q2, Q1, those are your good wins. Q1 being the best, quad four being the worst loss. All right, so that's Arkansas's line. Georgia's 2-10 in quad one, 3-0 in quad two, 3-0 in quad three, and 8-0 in quad four. VCU, these are the teams that like you're looking at right now. VCU has played nowhere the amount of quad one games that Georgia and Arkansas have. They are 1-1 in quad one, 50%, but just 2 games played in quad one. Then they're 5-3 in quad two, and then 2-0 in quad three, and they have a quad four loss. They're sitting at 11-1 in quad four. Yeah, VCU plays a lot of bad teams. They're an Atlantic 10 team. So they don't have the number of quality wins. They have decent metrics helping them out in seeding. But overall, they are 6-4 in their quad one and quad two games combined. That's pretty helpful for them. So it's kind of a question of, do you justify that with them having better metrics jumping over Georgia or Arkansas without an additional quad one win, or just another quad two loss or another quad two win at this point? SMU has no quad one wins. They're on 5-2 in quad two, 9-0 in quad three, and 5-0 in quad four. So no bad losses, but no quad one wins for SMU. They're running out of chances for quad ones as well. I believe Duke is their last quad one chance, and they have a quad three game on the horizon as well. Wake Forest is 2-6 in quad one, 4-0 in quad two, 7-1 in quad three, and 6-0 in quad four. Wake Forest being the other team with a bad loss that lost to Florida State, which is kind of harming them right now. They're like SMU. They're running it. They got a game against Clemson, I believe, late in the season. I might have it backwards. SMU might be playing Clemson and Wake Forest playing Duke. Someone's playing someone good over there, and it's like one of the few opportunities in the ACC to collect another quad one win. That's where the equation's kind of balancing out at this point. They have opportunities in front of them. VCU has nothing but landmines in front of them with quad threes, quad fours, and quad twos in front of their way, while Georgia and Arkansas have tons of opportunity remaining there on the bubble. Can they keep going without, they will not have to worry about taking a bad loss. They just need to win. Both these teams just need to win. For SMU, Wake Forest, they got to be good teams in the process and not lose to bad teams. For VCU, they can't lose any bad basketball games. If you're a fan of Georgia and Arkansas at this point, what you don't want to happen is you want VCU to take a bad loss somewhere in their remaining conference schedule, and you do not want them to win the Atlantic 10 tournament. that would make them an automatic bid. And then George Mason becomes your biggest worry, who's currently the leader out there in the Atlantic 10. Atlantic 10 has historically been a 2 to 3 bid league, so it's not odd to see them get one more team in the tournament. That may be the team that Arkansas and Georgia, maybe Oklahoma at this point, are fighting with to get that last piece in. So, Maddie, who do you put in? Do you put VCU in? Do you go Wake Forest? Do you leave Georgia and Arkansas? What are your thoughts?
This is a hard one to play out, especially, going off of where everybody's at right now. Because like we've talked about, basically the only games left in the SEC are good games for both Arkansas and Georgia. Because at that point it can only get better from there. And like you said, VCU basically just can't lose bad ones.
Which is most their schedule. Yeah, by the way.
So I mean, just looking at it right now, looking at, the losses versus the wins, kind of where these teams are seated, because I mean, you take some losses, a game could jump up a quad, especially for some of these, lower level teams that haven't been playing SEC teams, just quad one after quad one after quad one. Um, so I think that's kind of what you take into consideration. And just for tournament quality, I leave in the SEC teams
I
because once face the best of the best from other conferences, they've already been battle tested. They've hit those quad one games night after night after night, and they're ready for it.
yeah, I'm like you. It's not even the quality thing, like just like they've been battle tested. To me, like I think the committee told us a lot. Last year, I think some of the bracketologists who are hesitant to just go Georgia, Arkansas in right now, are some of the ones who got burned last year in the bracket matrix because they ended up favoring the Mountain West as strongly as they did last year. Remember when we talked to Bracket Dom last year, and he was number 1 2 seasons ago, and we were like, "What do you think about this?" He's like, "I think the Mountain West is going to do really well." And then it got Selection Sunday, and he had one of his worst showings in years on the Matrix. And he was like, "Yeah, no, big surprises for me. The committee did not like the Mountain West as much as several of us bracketologists liked it. And like we thought this was going to be totally different." Here's the committee, and they've got 6 of the top 8 right now, SEC teams right now, favoring a lot in what they're liking out of the SEC. I'm kind of vibing with the idea that either Arkansas or Georgia are in right now. And it might just be like, okay, category bucket, let's see what happens for these teams. But in theoretically with 1 or 2 more wins. Like they may not even have to do as much as we've thought they've had to do in the past. Like it's strange because like SMU has not, they literally have no quad one wins at this point. So I'm with you on that front that they have like it's more favorable for the ACC teams. I think there's a better chance that the ACC teams get in over VCU over a 2 bid Atlantic 10 right now, given the circumstances and the strength of the power conferences this season. VCU's good, and I don't like that for them because I do like mid-major basketball. But I think the right now the committee is really favoring those SEC teams, and I do think that next they'll look down for another power conference team before they put VCU in at this point. I don't know that they would give VCU right now a bid over, say, Wake Forest. I think they would choose Wake Forest over VCU, given the way that they lined out that top 16. Because like one team that really speaks to me on that thinking as well, Memphis is not in that top 16. And there were bracketologists thinking that Memphis would be included in that top 16 as a 4 seed. They're not there. I don't think the committee's given that much love to mid majors this season.
Yeah, I agree with you there, David. It's just been a rocky season for anybody that's not in the SEC or ACC. I feel like when it comes to,
Well,
you
Big
know,
12, the ACC is its own yuck right now. This is probably the worst the ACC's ever looked.
yeah, so I mean, just outside of Power Five conferences, you haven't seen a whole lot of movement, especially when you look back at the past polls. They've just got a different standing, I feel like, outside of these Power Five players.
I kind of feel that the AP poll will have no deciding factor in this, but like there's just been no love for the mid majors this season, and I do think relatively there might be a reason for that. And I'm starting to think like last year they didn't give the mid majors the love they wanted out of the Mountain West. Maybe the message here is that the mid major teams need to schedule better, and if they want to be considered for the tournament, is the message that maybe the committee's trying to send right now. Um, so I'll be surprised. We'll see what the result is, and how what the committee's exact thinking is. They've changed a little bit over this last season. Like last year, like I said, the Mountain West should have theoretically gotten more teams in. Um, and in the past several seasons, they told us that conference tournaments didn't matter that much. Last year, all of a sudden, conference tournaments mattered a lot, and they were not thinking strongly on the Mountain West. So a lot of reverse thinking last year. We'll see how that goes going into this season. They are considering some different metrics this year, including Torvik and wins over bubble. So we'll see how the committee kind of thinks. For now, let's get out of the really, really nerdy stuff about college basketball. This will become a bigger conversation as we get closer to March. Opportunities are in front of Arkansas and Georgia, Oklahoma as well. We talked about the resumes in there. Let's talk about basketball this week in this conference and kind of hit these spots real quick as we talk about these upcoming games. Because our first one is, of course, one of these bubble teams as they're got a big, big road trip.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about all the opportunity that lies ahead of these teams, and this is major. The Oklahoma Sooners going down to Florida to face the Gators, one of those top seeded teams in the eyes of the committee right now. David, what in the world does Oklahoma need to do to pull this off and pull themselves up by the bootstraps here?
Shoot the three, and learn how to rebound. That's the objective for Oklahoma. You're talking about the team that's 243rd in the country when it comes to offensive rebound percentage. They're going to need some second chance points, man. And they're going to need to not turn over the basketball. Oklahoma turns over the rock a lot, and especially when you're going to face what is one of the best, a top 10 defense in the country with Florida, one of the best in the SEC on the defensive end, and a team that can shoot right along with Oklahoma in that 35% area. And then this is a team that's effective from the interior as well and got a lot of good front court players overall. When you look at Ruben Chinyonlu, when you look at Thomas Hauk, you got guys everywhere that you're looking for Florida in that front court, and that's an area that Oklahoma has not excelled at. And then, Maddie, I know you really like the guards. There's a lot of good guards on Oklahoma, Jeremiah Fears and Duke Miles. As well, but you do like the front court or the back court for the Gators quite a bit.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, Oklahoma's got some players. We've talked about it, but we've also talked about the fact their star player, Jeremiah Fears, hasn't been playing the way that he started out the season. It's slowly fallen down. So if you do a side-by-side comparison, you look at Fears, who's dropped down to 26% from three, and that was their moneymaker for a long time. And then you look at, not even one of the top guards for Florida. I mean, he's phenomenal, but he's still shooting over 50%. And Will Richard. So I mean,
Are
there's
you comparing
a lot.
are you comparing an NBA draft pick to a role player on Florida right now? Is that where you're going?
I am, because they need to shoot the basketball better if they're gonna be beaten by a role player on the floor.
It's true. They've dropped, and their three-point shooting has not been as good. And I'm with you. You talk about Will Richard. You're talking about a player with 22.7 offensive rating overall, and then you flip the page and you go to where Jeremiah Fears has been 101.1 offensive rating. That's a 20-point difference per 100 possessions. Like that's insane how much the go-to guy for Oklahoma has fallen behind the offensive rating of a role player on Florida. Yeah, I'm with you on this. Like overall, Florida's better offense. Florida's got the better defense. They got the bigger front court. There is a task at hand for Oklahoma going into Gainesville in a game they need to win because they got to get that bad taste out of the committee's mouth and their mouth with losing to LSU at home. Here's your opportunity. This is a quad 1A game. Quad one, the best kind of win there is in college basketball. If you win this, it's going to be helpful. If you lose this one, it's not going to hurt you, but it certainly isn't helping yourself. So, like to me, like this is that kind of situation. I've got you 100% in this, and I agree with what you're saying. Kim Palm doesn't give Oklahoma much of a chance. They're giving this one to the Gators 86-71 at 91%. Maddie, who you going with?
Yeah, I'm not taking the 9% gamble here. I am going to go with the Florida Gators at home.
And I am also lacing up the Jordans in this one, and I'm going the Gators 100%. Everybody got that because
You do that because they're both Jordan.
they're Jumpman teams. Yeah. Well, how about a maroon game? We go from a Jordan's game to a maroon game. How about that? Another one of our top 25 matchups. We're here. Both these teams coming off of big wins at home against rivals. Overall, it's Texas A&M and Mississippi State facing each other. Maddie, this is going to be a confrontation in the front court, I feel like, more than anything else when it comes to this game. And this is one that I'm particularly interested in. Maddie, how you feeling about the Dogs and the Aggies?
Yeah, we talked about how Texas A&M and Arkansas last week was going to be a rock fight. This might be even more so
This is
because
a
we
rock
saw
fight of
what,
rock fights.
right? We saw what Mississippi State did to Ole Miss. They were able to play a fantastic defensive game, especially on the road. What are they going to do to these guys at home? You go up, we talk about it all the time. Texas A&M can't shoot the basketball.
Nope, they sure can't.
If they're playing against a phenomenal defensive team like Mississippi State showed us this past weekend, are we gonna have like a 0 to 5 game? Is that gonna be the final line? Is it gonna look like a football score?
Okay, so like A&M's defense is just like a hair better than where Mississippi State's defense is on Ken Palm right now, but you certainly got to hand it to Mississippi State. They're the better offensive team overall, and they've got a rotation of guys with Josh Hubbard, who's a really good player in a lot of different ways, and one of the nationally ranked really darn good and up there with over 120 offensive rating. Sees about 80% of the minutes for Mississippi State this season, and Keyshawn Murphy's been effective in the front court as well. Kugel's been a really good contributor for this team. Michael Nwako's really stepped up, and then Cam Matthews, the tank, is probably one of the best role players in the country overall in the way that he's put on this team and the way that they use him. He's been great. I also like RJ Melendez overall. Mississippi State's a good basketball team. But here's the factor I'm really liking in this one. When you look at the offensive rebound percentage for Mississippi State, how about 34.9%, which is 40th in the country, in the top 40 in the country. He's talking almost the the 10th percentile in college basketball, going against Texas A&M, who is obviously the best. But here you are with a team that is committed to rebounding on the glass as well. How many can State take away? How much can Mississippi State not turn over the basketball? Because Texas A&M will turn over the basketball. 221st in the country in turnover percentage. A team that really has struggled at it. Great defense for Texas A&M. For Arkansas, when they faced Texas A&M over this week, it was really a conflict of errors. Arkansas hurt themselves too much in this game. Mississippi State do not turn over the basketball. Let's watch something interesting happen. That's kind of my takeaway here. Originally, Maddie, State was not projected to win this game like last week. Like when we were coming into it, and I was sitting there going, they're going to get a huge win at home in the hump. They're seriously overdue for it. They have not had that win yet. They've had that loss to Alabama. They had that loss to Missouri. They had the loss to Auburn. Or excuse me, they had the loss to Kentucky in the hump. They didn't play Auburn in the hump. But I was sitting there like, they are going to do it to somebody. Is this going to be the case in point right here? This home game against Texas A&M, and Ken Palm's got State winning this one 72-71 at 52%. This is a coin flip game, Maddie, in this top 25 matchup. Probably the best game of the week. Who are you going with? Are you going Aggies or are you going Mississippi State?
I'm gonna take State at home just because I feel like they need it. They need to continue to grind to be able to get a couple of those wins stacked up, give themselves better seeding in the tournament here. And Texas A&M can barely shoot at home. I don't think they're going to be able to pull off any crazy upsets on the road. I could 100% be wrong. I was wrong about Mississippi State last week, but I just have a feeling.
They showed us something. They showed us something. This team's ready to go, and they just kind of got rolled up into what is their tough road ahead. Look, if they win this game, the rest of the schedule is somewhat favorable for them. Texas A&M will have Oklahoma. Alabama's not a good one in Coleman, but after that, they got LSU, Texas, Arkansas. Like, could you imagine State getting hot right here at the end of the year, and this be the game that sets them off to where they win, let's say 3 of the last 5, 4 out of the last 5, however it plays out. Let's see what happens here. I'm going to take State over Texas A&M in this one. I think the Hump's ready for it. I think this is a big opportunity to get a top 10 win in the Hump this season for State. Let's go to the next one, Maddie.
Is it finally time for South Carolina to get a
Trash
win?
basketball.
He said this, I feel like every show for the last couple of weeks. South Carolina heading down to the PMAC to face off against LSU. Like I said, trash basketball. Two are the SEC. Who's the best of the worst, I guess, is our
Oh
question.
my gosh. Like, honestly, if LSU didn't make this complicated and go out and beat Oklahoma and Norman this weekend, I'd be like, oh man, let's go Gamecocks here for the sickos game of the week right here, man. Like, this is it. South Carolina's gonna finally do it. Like, they're gonna do it on the road and Baton Rouge, get the job done. I don't know, man. Like, so here's some things that I favor South Carolina in this one. 306 in the country in 3-point percentage. Horrible behind the arc. I don't even know how LSU is this bad on offense and they cannot shoot a three. They are just not good at it overall. And then also when you talk about their rebounding or turnover ability, 296 in the country for LSU in the turnover battle. South Carolina's a decent defensive team overall. So I do think they can turn over LSU quite a bit. And then trips to the free throw line, kind of middle of the pack for LSU. So we'll see how South Carolina lines up there. South Carolina is not as bad shooting the three. Nowhere as effective from two, which kind of is a favor point for LSU in this one. They're decent at rim protection. LSU is one of the better shot blocking teams in the country overall. And then getting to the free throw line, South Carolina has been pretty good at getting the free throw line. It's a matter of converting those free throws. They are the 260th team in the country when it comes to free throw percentage. You want to talk about why you lose close basketball games to South Carolina? Shooting 69.5% for the free throw line is a pretty good reason to look at right there. That probably makes the difference in a couple of these matchups that that South Carolina's had so far this year. But you have a good interior play with Colin Murray Boyles. And then also you've got Zach Davis, who's been mixing in the power forward spot. And then Benjamin Bosman's Verdunk has been pretty good as well for the role that he plays on this team. Not a great minute seer on this team, but one who's done well enough when he does find his way onto the floor. And then rebound wise, South Carolina sitting at 31.2% on the offensive rebound front. That's an area that I think South Carolina can find some second chance points for them, especially with having a star like Colin Murray Bowles.
Yeah, and then you look at Jamari Thomas just keeps getting better and better after that injury. So do we see South Carolina get this first win? Kim Palm doesn't think so. They think the Tigers have this one at home, 70-66 at 62%. David, who you picking in the best basketball game of the week for
I
the
want to
SEC?
look something up real fast on Ken Plum. I'm curious about this. Like I want to see this and see this factoring when it comes to this. Yep, I think that's exactly what's happening here. The reason Ken Palm likes South Carolina when I click on it is that you have what they give home court advantage, the 39th best in the country to the PMAC this season. I don't think fans are getting too excited about a 2-10 SEC team this season. I don't know if that's going to tilt the scales really that much. So I think this game is really close. It should be a coin flip in this one overall. Look, I think so. I think LSU just complicated things overall with that win over Oklahoma on the road, which I will grapple with for a while. But South Carolina has been in every game this season for the most part, and except when they're faced against really good competition. They've done well against those teams. LSU's been getting beat by double digits. I think South Carolina, if they could shoot some free throws, have a good performance in their backcourt, and could get Colin Murray Bowles in good situations and good matchups down low, I can't believe it, but I'm finally going to happen here. I said I wouldn't pick them, but I'm picking South Carolina to get the road win over LSU.
You know what? You talked me into it, David. I'm going to go South Carolina too.
Look at that. Look at that. We went a group of people right here were like, I got no hope for South Carolina. There's like, you know what? They're staying close, and that's something that LSU has struggled with. They just had to make this more complicated to insert doubt into our belief right now. South Carolina pulling this off.
Oh man, it's gonna be a great game. Can't wait to watch.
Yeah. Yeah, that's gonna be my destination game this week. Road contest for Vanderbilt as they took the loss to Tennessee this week, but they've got a huge chance to get another Quad 1A opportunity against the Kentucky Wildcats in Rep Arena. Maddie, look, they were really close against Tennessee. Vanderbilt already beat Kentucky and Memorial this season. Can they get a sweep over the Wildcats this year?
I don't know about this one just because I feel like Kentucky has been confusing me over the last few weeks.
That's fair.
Are they gonna show up? Who's gonna be on the floor is my big question because we saw a couple games ago Lamont Butler slowly start to work his way back in. Saw him aggravate that injury a little bit. So if he's in, I've full force believe Kentucky can win this game flawlessly. But when he's off the floor, their defense tends to suffer even more. So I I am not sure. Really depends here with Kentucky for me. Who's showing up and how's their defense looking?
Yeah, I'm with you there. Like overall, like Vanderbilt is this team that likes to cause chaos on the floor. They will rebound like crazy. And they're close to that top 100 margin. They're effective. They've got an effective field goal shooting team, one that also allows a lot of effective field goal shooting. But there's one stat out here that really stands out to me as you go into Rep Arena against a Mark Pope offense. They allow opponents to shoot 37.3% from three. That to me is not a recipe for success, especially when you've been a team that's not perfect on the rebounding end. Like you're decent, you're right in the middle of the pack in the country when you give teams second chance opportunities, but not against Brandon Garrison and not against Amari Williams. Like I think those are going to be two key components for Kentucky in this game, and I do think that number 5 spot's one. Carey's got a lot of work to do here. McLaughlin's got a lot of work to do here for Vanderbilt if they were going to be able to pull this off. It's just a matter of will Kentucky shoot like we think Kentucky's capable of? That season average for the season for the Wildcats, they're shooting an astounding 37.9% from three. Insane, insane 3-point shooting. They also allow teams to shoot 52.5% from two and can churn a lot of points, and they do not know how to stop the basketball at times, which is something that AJ Hogarth's going to get after them about and try to get downhill. And then there's also Jason Edwards, who's another good guard who can find a shot anywhere on the floor at all 3 levels. So I do think that's a combination of like, you're right. Is Lamont Butler in? Do you have Lamont Butler? And can you shoot threes the way that you want to shoot threes? We just saw Texas tear up the backcourt for Kentucky, in that game in Austin this weekend. When you look at the comparison in that one, look who's going off in that. Tremont Mark had 26 points. That is Mr. Mid-range specialist doing numbers. Trey Johnson had 32 points and 9 rebounds against Kentucky. And then you're also talking about some of the more role player guys on this one. Pope taking 9 points and 3 rebounds in that game. Kent getting 6 points. He's technically a forward, but he kind of mixes into that backcourt rotation. 6 points, 8 rebounds. Like, what can Vanderbilt's guards do? Like, that's the path to success in this game, especially without Lamont Butler being on the floor for Kentucky. That's going to be the big, big concern is that health status for your best defender on this team. I'm worried about it. I am really worried about it. But Maddie, what are you? Kim Palm's got this game 89-80 at 79%. Going to the Wildcats. Maddie, I know you said you wouldn't take a 9% chance. I think you said a gamble. Would you be interested in a 21% gamble?
I'm interested in it. I'm definitely interested. But being at home, I have a feeling Kentucky's going to get the shots that they want. I think it's going to be a lot closer than 9 points. I think we're going to be fighting for possessions at the end of this game. But I think Kentucky's going to come out just slightly ahead here.
I am gonna go Vanderbilt.
Okay.
Yeah, it's I know I've been crazy in that. No, I'm kidding. I'm gonna go Kentucky in this one. I do think the 3-point shooting is going to rock in this one. But you're right. I think it's going to be a close fight. I just want to see Big Blue Nation get a little bit upset. But yeah, I do think this one's going to be a tough battle. Kentucky, if they shoot well, maybe they get Jackson Robinson back or one of the guards they need back. If they get Lamont Butler back, I think that's the even more important one to have that defensive presence in there. But if they can do something to make sure that they stop the ball and this doesn't turn into the Ohio State game, and they can shoot the ball well, give me Kentucky and this one at home.
All right, so we've talked about it time and time again already in the show. Opportunities. Arkansas, they've got an opportunity ahead of them.
Do they?
They do. Opportunity. It's I don't know if they're going to grasp it or not, but they're going to Auburn in what I have a feeling might be a bloodbath.
Yeah, I don't feel good about this game. I mean, it's a tough road game and a tough environment and everything else. I am curious. I didn't see much about the health status of Janai Broom after the Iron Bowl game. I'll be interested to see what the follow up is that for that in practice this week, and to see if Janai Broom's back to 100%, because I think that's a curious case there. We've seen a little bit of improvement from Jonas Adu, not drastic. There's also some talk from Cal going a 2-5 front for this Arkansas team and maybe mixing Adu in on the defensive end while working Z at the 4 a little bit. That's interesting because it doesn't matter a lot of the size, but you got a 7'2" 3-point shooter out there. Like he's shooting over everybody. Like it's funky. I'm not looking necessarily for Arkansas to win this game, but can they make it interesting? Can they find a road to upset in this one? I'm curious about the health status for Auburn's front court. I think that's one of the things, and then how they match up with Z overall. You need your guards to play well if you're Arkansas. Defensively, I don't have a problem with what they are defensively good enough to play with Auburn's offense. When that's a different question. Play with, keep it close in the front court portion of the game. Yeah, they're defensively good enough. The offense has always been the problem with the inconsistency of Janelle Davis and DJ Wagner. And then, the injury status has not helped things. And then Carter Knox and Billy Richmond. Billy Richmond's a good defender, but not a knockdown shooter. More of a pure athlete. And then Carter Knox has games where he is on fire. He was on fire against Texas A&M. Just no one else was on fire with him. And then he has games where he's completely quiet. I think Carter Knox is good enough to keep it interesting. If you can bring the whole squad together and you can get those wings and guards to play well, what you do in the front court and maybe a potentially banged up Auburn front court and not a trap game, but kind of a sleeper game, a game where you just came off a huge basketball game. Maybe you keep it close late and give yourself a chance. I don't know. I'm kind of like you. I could also vibe the bloodbath 100% here as well going into Neville.
Yeah, I mean, I think you mentioned it. For me, the biggest portion of this game, we have got to see something more from Jonas Adu. We've got to see some more points in the paint. We've got to see some better offensive boards and putting up those second chance opportunities. Or, even a kick out to get a 3 every now and then, because he's just not producing the way we thought. And I think that's why Arkansas is in the situation they're in. That and the late jump start from Janelle Davis. If we see both of them play the way we thought they were going to at the beginning of the season, this is a whole different basketball game.
Look, you got 19 minutes out of Jonas Adu in your last basketball game. He put up 4 points, 3 rebounds, and 3 assists, 1 steal, 1 block. That might be his best line of the season. I think he had a double-double against UTSA when he first got back from injury. But honestly, that might be the best game we've had so far out of him. There is something trending better. I'm not expecting him to set the world on fire, but he got 7 and 4 on the rebounds, and 2 blocks. Interesting. Yeah. Especially if you got Z hitting threes along the way. And causing some chaos. I'm interested to see if they do kind of go to that 2 big rotation. I think that could be very interesting, especially with Z's versatility. That's always been something I've been somewhat interested in because TB and Z seem to me like good rotation pieces. If you can have Jonas Adu play really good defense for you at the 5 spot. Curious. I'll be interested to see it. So far, Adu has just looked out of shape coming back from injury this season. Overall, I think Auburn's got some good defenders that will be able to take some stuff away from Arkansas. And the backcourt is definitely offensively better in Auburn. Defensively, I think they pair up well, but like the offense has been better for Auburn, especially when you get Miles Kelly out there shooting. KenPom's got this game 85-67 at 94%. Maddie, you vibing with an 18-point loss for Arkansas? Who do you take into this game?
I don't think we're gonna see quite 18 points, but I think Auburn's gonna win it pretty convincingly.
If our Arkansas beats that number, I'll be happy with that result. But I'm with you. I'm not gonna be happy about it. But I'm gonna take Auburn in this game. That just makes more sense to me. Again, there's no penalty for Arkansas in this game, especially when you're playing the number one team in everything. So no penalty for losing this game. It's everything to gain for Arkansas in this one. Last game we're talking about here, that's Alabama at Missouri, another top 25 matchup. These are two really darn good offenses we're going to be seeing in this one, but this one's going to be in Columbia this time. Of course, Alabama's coming off what is a hugely emotional game and a loss there in Coleman. Maddie, what are your thoughts here on this game?
Like you said, I like the offenses. I think they match up well. I think we're gonna see a lot of points, a lot of shots. But I think Alabama's defense edges out Missouri just a little bit. We've got both defenses have gotten better, especially, coming into this point of the season. We've seen Alabama play a lot of aggressive defense. We've seen Missouri play a lot of aggressive defense. So I really think this game's about whose shot's going down.
Yeah, I think that's a big part of it. Yeah, certainly. I do find what I find interesting is that Missouri's offense and defense, like they are very parallel to Alabama. And when you look at it on a metric standpoint, Alabama just a hair better. I think Alabama's defense is slightly better, and their offense is slightly better. Missouri is like the next step down of that category, but they're very effective points per shot team. You're talking about a team that is shooting 55.8% effective field goal percentage, whereas Alabama's 55.9 effective field goal percentage. Very two teams that find effective shots. The 3-point shooting for Missouri with Tamar Bates and Caleb Grill has been excellent. And that is an area that Alabama certainly has to shoot better than what they did in their previous games. So that kind of makes this game a little bit more interesting to me. But one area that I'm very curious in is the front court. Clifford Morey, Grant Nelson. Grant Nelson's going to be very hard to pair with. Very physical presence for Clifford Morey. Jaron Stevenson's been pretty darn good. I like the front. Mohamed Diamante is nothing but a ball of energy. I like the front court better for Alabama. Missouri's young in the front court and has got guys who have not in the past been that big of contributors in the front court outside of Mark Mitchell. Mark Mitchell is probably the guy that you're looking for to be your front court leader for Missouri. But when you go down to this rotation, your best front court player besides Mark Mitchell is Trent Pierce, who is quite good. But you go a little bit further down, Josh Gray, limited role player. You talk about, you're looking a little bit further down, Jacob Cruz, who's mixed into the 4 spot. He's more or less a role player for this team. I don't necessarily think role players are just going to get it done when you have a very talented bench and depth at the 4 and 5 spot for Alabama and some really darn good wings for the Tide as well. But KenPom's got their own opinion on this game, Maddie. KenPom's got this game 86-85 going to Missouri, 54%. One of the closest games of the week, according to the computer. Who you got?
Give me Bama. I don't think they're gonna lose 2 in a row, especially with where they're sitting right now. Like you said, I like that front court a lot better for Alabama than I do for Mizzou, and that slightly heightened defense. And I love the fact that you very nonchalantly called Mizzou the great value version of Alabama.
I didn't say that. I just said the next step down. Um, like honestly, I mean that's what it is. But these Alabama's been a shade better everywhere. They're going to be playing in Missouri's arena, and that home court's going to make a very big presence in what's going to cause chaos. But I do like a return to the mean. Alabama did not shoot anywhere that they normally are capable of against Auburn. It's a big ask for Missouri's defense to do what Auburn's defense did in Coleman. That's a huge ask. I expect a bounce back from Missouri or from Alabama 3-point shooting wise. I'm going to take the Tide as well. All right, guys, if you have not already, please like and subscribe to the Hoops Southbound Show. We greatly appreciate it. We've got more stuff on the way. I hope you enjoyed a lot of our March conversation because we're going to get more. There's going to be more March stuff on the way. We'll tone it back a little bit next week, but we'll kind of keep the same vibe of where we're going. Not as many headlines this week, but until the next one, we'll see you soon.
Thanks, guys. Have a great week.